My mother-in-law shrieked it at me, her face redder than a stop sign, veins popping out on her neck. "You lazy bum, you good-for-nothing parasite. What do you even contribute to this family, huh? Just eat our food and breathe our air." Her words, sharp as broken glass, cut through the kitchen air. My father-in-law, a man shaped like a potato, grunted in agreement from his armchair in the living room, not even bothering to look up from the television. My wife Sarah was standing by the fridge, eyes glued to the floor, her shoulders hunched. She always did that. Hunch her shoulders, look at the floor, become invisible. It was her coping mechanism, I guess. Mine was to just stand there, take it and let the resentment build brick by brick until my chest felt like a pressure cooker about to blow. This wasn't new, you understand, not even close. It was Tuesday, so it must be lazy bum day. Monday was you'll never amount to anything day. Wednesday was usually why can't you be more like Sarah's cousin Gary? He's a doctor day. It was a well-oiled machine of daily insults, carefully crafted over the 5 years I'd been married to Sarah. 5 years of living in their house, paying rent that was always too little. Being told I wasn't good enough, wasn't smart enough, wasn't rich enough, wasn't anything enough. I worked hard, harder than they knew. I drove a beat-up car, yes, but I was building something. I worked long hours, often late into the night, hunched over a laptop, fueled by cheap coffee, and the burning desire to prove them wrong. But to them, if it wasn't a fancy suit and a corner office, it wasn't real work. If I wasn't bringing in 6 figures and buying them a new Mercedes, I was a failure. Sarah tried to defend me sometimes in a small voice, but her parents would just steamroll her. They always did. Sarah was their sweet, perfect daughter, and I was the blight on their perfect family tree. "Are you even listening to me, boy?" my mother-in-law screeched, her voice cracking the calm morning. "Or are you too busy dreaming about your next nap? Honestly, Sarah, how do you put up with him? He's got no ambition, no drive. He's going to drag you down, just watch." My hands clenched at my sides. My knuckles went white. I could feel the familiar heat rising in my face. This was it. The moment I usually just nodded, mumbled something about trying harder, and retreated to my small cramped office, which was really just a glorified closet. But today was different. Today the words hit me, but they didn't penetrate. They bounced off something solid inside me, something I'd spent the last few weeks building. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with air that suddenly felt lighter, cleaner. The corner of my lips twitched, fighting back a smile. Oh, if only they knew. If only they had the slightest clue about what I'd been up to. The irony of her calling me a good-for-nothing parasite while I stood there, holding the weight of a monumental secret, was almost too much to bear. "You know what, Martha?" I said, my voice surprisingly calm, almost casual. Sarah finally lifted her head, her eyes wide, staring at me. My father-in-law even grunted again, this time sounding less like agreement and more like a surprised pig. "You might be right about one thing." My mother-in-law paused, her mouth slightly agape, ready for the next volley of insults. She wasn't expecting me to agree. "Oh, and what's that, Mr. Genius?" "Maybe I haven't contributed much," I continued, letting the words hang in the air, watching their confusion. "At least not in a way you'd understand. Not in a way that involves a fancy job title or a big shiny car." I took a step closer, slowly, deliberately. My heart was pounding now, a drum solo in my chest. But I kept my voice steady. This was it. The moment I had been working towards, agonizing over, for months. The moment of truth. Her eyes narrowed. "What are you rambling about, you idiot? Get to the point." I met her gaze, no longer flinching, no longer looking away. For the first time in 5 years, I saw not a fearsome monster, but just an old woman, full of bitterness, sitting on a ticking time bomb. "Point, Martha," I said, a slow, deliberate smile finally breaking through. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who held all the cards, who had been pushed to the edge and finally found his way back, bringing a surprise with him. "Point is this. You just called me a lazy bum, a good-for-nothing parasite," she scoffed. "And I meant every word." "I know you did," I replied, my smile widening, showing a flash of teeth. "What you don't know, what you couldn't possibly know, is that a couple of hours ago I finished signing the papers." Sarah gasped, a small choked sound. She had no idea either. No one did. "What papers?" my father-in-law finally mumbled from the living room. His curiosity piqued enough to turn his head slightly. I looked from him to my mother-in-law, who was now just staring at me, a flicker of unease in her eyes. The silence in the kitchen was thick, heavy with unspoken question. I let it hang there for a moment, savoring it, letting the anticipation build. Then I dropped the bomb. "The papers," I said, my voice cutting through the quiet. "That made me the proud, lazy, good-for-nothing bum owner of this land. The land this house is built on. Your house, Martha. Your house, David. It's sitting on my land now." The silence that followed was deafening. It wasn't a silence of curiosity anymore, but a silence of pure, unadulterated shock. My mother-in-law's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. My father-in-law dropped his remote. Sarah just stood there, pale as a ghost, her hand over her mouth. The heat in my chest was gone, replaced by a cold, satisfying calm. The pressure cooker had finally released its steam, and the explosion was just beginning. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. My mother-in-law, Martha, finally found her voice, but it came out as a strangled squawk. "You are lying. You don't have that kind of money. You are a lazy bum, remember? You couldn't buy a shoelace, let alone land." My father-in-law, David, lumbered out of his armchair, his face a confused mix of anger and disbelief. "What is he talking about, Martha? Is this some kind of sick joke?" Sarah, my wife, was still frozen, staring at me as if I'd just confessed to being an alien. I knew this would be hard for her. She was caught between a rock and a very hard place. But I couldn't keep taking the abuse. Something had to give. "No joke, David," I said, my voice still steady, even as my internal victory dance was threatening to burst out. "Every single acre. It's all mine now, signed, sealed, and delivered this morning." I watched Martha's face cycle through denial, then fury, then a dawning horror. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment decision. This was years of silent planning, years of taking every insult and turning it into fuel. Let me take you back a bit. 5 years ago, when Sarah and I got married, we were young, optimistic, and broke. Her parents, bless their condescending hearts, offered us a place to stay. "You can live in our spare room," Martha had said, a generous smile plastered on her face, "until you get on your feet." It sounded nice, a temporary solution. We thought it would be a few months. It turned into 5 years. Their spare room was small, cramped, and barely big enough for our double bed and a tiny dresser. There was no real privacy. Every morning, Martha would bang on the door at 7 a.m. sharp, even if I'd been working until 3 a.m., demanding to know what my plans for the day were. They charged us a paltry rent at first, then raised it every year, claiming property taxes or utility increases, even though we knew their bills hadn't gone up that much. It was never about the money for them. It was about the control. It was about making us feel like charity cases, like we owed them everything, and the insults. Oh, the insults. They were relentless. They never missed an opportunity to remind me how I wasn't good enough for their perfect daughter. Sarah came from a family of doctors, lawyers, and successful business owners. I came from a modest background. I was a freelance web developer. To them, that meant I was unemployed and played video games all day. They didn't understand the concept of remote work, or building a client base, or the grind of entrepreneurship. All they saw was me at home, in front of a computer, not wearing a suit. "He's a bum, Sarah," Martha would declare at family dinners, loud enough for everyone to hear. "No real job, just fiddles around on that computer all day. You deserve better, sweetie." Sarah would squirm, her face red, trying to change the subject. I would clench my jaw, pretending not to hear, plotting my quiet revenge. About a year ago, I overheard Martha talking on the phone about how the land next to their house, a large plot that stretched back quite a ways, was going up for sale. It was owned by an elderly couple who were moving to Florida. The land was technically part of their property, but it had a separate title because it was originally intended for a second house that was never built. Martha was complaining about it. "They're asking for a fortune, and if some developer buys it, who knows what they'll put there." A noisy apartment complex, a Walmart. She was worried about her property values. That's when the idea clicked. What if I bought it? It wasn't cheap, no, but it wasn't impossible either. For years, I had been religiously saving every penny I could. Every freelance gig, every project, a significant chunk went into a separate account. I lived frugally. While Martha complained I never took Sarah out to fancy restaurants, I was funneling money into my secret fund. I drove my old car, wore old clothes, rarely went out. I told Sarah I was saving for a down payment on a house, which was true, just not the whole truth. I was saving for this house, or rather, the land it sat on. The land was listed privately first, through an old family friend of the sellers. That's how Martha knew about it. It wasn't on the open market yet. I knew I had to act fast. I contacted the sellers discreetly. They were lovely people, just wanting a fair price and a quiet transaction. The price was still steep for me, but it was doable. It would drain nearly every penny I had saved. It meant I'd be starting from scratch again financially, but it was worth it. Every single penny. I secured a small loan, just enough to bridge the gap, promising myself I'd pay it off as quickly as possible. The rest was pure cash, my lazy bum earnings. The process was agonizingly slow. Lawyers, paperwork, title searches. I had to be incredibly careful, making sure Martha and David didn't catch wind of it. I told Sarah I was taking on a massive new project that required a lot of off-site meetings. She bought. She always believed in me, even when her parents tried to beat that belief out of her. And so, this morning, after months of sneaking around, after countless late nights hunched over my laptop earning the money, after countless hours on the phone with the real estate agents and lawyers, I finally closed the deal. The old couple got their money, I got the land, and Martha and David got their shocking surprise. "You think this is a joke?" I repeated, seeing the fear start to creep into Martha's eyes.
"Go ahead, call the county clerk's office. Ask about the deed for this address. You'll find my name on it now, John Miller, owner of record." I saw the colour drain from Martha's face. David looked like he was about to have a stroke. 9 times. Sarah was still silent, that her eyes were no longer wide with shock. They were wide with a dawning understanding, and maybe, just maybe, a tiny bit of pride. The game had changed. The lazy bum had just bought the entire playing field. Their sports were the fight hand, and times longer than you. The immediate aftermath was a messy explosion of disbelief and rage. Tom, my mother-in-law, started screaming again, but this time it was different, less commanding, more frantic. "This is impossible. It's a trick. You are making it up. Here is no way you bought our land. This is our land." "You bought our land. This is our land." David, bless his potato-shaped heart, was sputtering like an old engine. Our family built this house. Our family has lived here for 50 years. You can't just buy it. You own an H in our peers to buy it." I leaned against the kitchen counter, crossing my arms, watching them with a calm. I didn't entirely feel. 100 times the 12 pint on them with a calm. I didn't entirely. Heart was still doing the cha-cha, but my face was a mask of cool indifference. "I didn't buy the house, David," I corrected him gently, almost too gently. "I bought the land. The house is still yours. It's just sitting on my property now." This distinction seemed to hit them even harder. It made it real concrete. The house was theirs, but the ground beneath it, the very foundation of their security, was mine. The implications sank in like stones in a pond. You monster," Mother shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You insidious snake, how could you do this to us?" "To family," I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping me. Me, but scoff, a bitter laugh escaping me. "Mother, for 5 years. You've called me a lazy bum, a parasite, a good for nothing. You've told Sarah she deserves better than me. You made my life here a living hell. Was that family who..." She opened her mouth, ready with a retort, but no words came out. She seemed genuinely stumped. They always operated under the assumption that they could treat me however they wanted, and I would just take it and go backward. They never considered there would be consequences, especially not consequences that flipped the script so dramatically. So, finally moved, she walked over to me, slowly, as if in a daze. She didn't touch me, but she stood beside me, a silent statement of alliance. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world. I could feel her presence, her quiet support, and it emboldened me further. "Mom, Dad," Sarah said, her voice shaky but firm. "He's telling the truth. I can see it. You guys, you pushed him so hard." "Pushed him?" Mother exploded, turning her fury on her daughter. "We just wanted you to have a decent husband. Someone with ambition. Not this, teach. And what do you call yourselves now?" I interjected, cutting her off. "You are living on my property, so who's the leech, Martha? Who's the parasite now?" That shut her up. "Who the parasite now?" That shut her up. "Townsend, Linger, then you..." She staggered back a step as if I had physically slapped her. David just stood there, jaw slack, eyes wide and unseeing. The power dynamics had shifted completely. They were no longer the landlords, the benevolent benefactors. They were tenants, in a way occupying land that belonged to the person they despised. "This is illegal," David finally roared, finding his voice. "You can't just buy someone's land out from under them. We have adverse possession. We've been here for 50 years. I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile this time. "Longer than you. I had a very good lawyer, David. This land had a separate deed. Always has. It was zoned as an undeveloped lot adjacent to your main property. It was always for sale, just not always publicly. The previous owners agreed to a private sale. Everything is perfectly legal. An adverse possession, you pay property taxes on your plot, David, not on the adjacent, undeveloped lot. Tandle haven't been openly and notoriously occupying this specific piece of land for the required period. You just had access to it. Big difference. My lawyer made sure of all that." I could see the defeat in David's eyes. He wasn't a stupid man, just an arrogant one. He knew I was right. He knew he'd been outmaneuvered. "So what now?" Mother whispered, her voice stripped of its usual venom, replaced by a chilling fear. "What do you want?" "What do I want?" I repeated, letting the question hang in the air. That's a good question, Martha. What do you think I want after 5 years of being called a lazy bum and a parasite? After being told I'm more lazy bum and a parasite? After being told I am not good enough for your daughter? The fear deepened in her eyes. She clearly imagined the worst: eviction, homelessness, public humiliation. The true eviction, homelessness, public humiliation. You can't just kick us out. She cried, her voice rising in pitch again. This is our home. We have nowhere to go. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, I said. My voice, deliberately flat, have to stay there. For now, I just wanted you to know, the lazy bum, he just bought the ground you were standing on. Think about that for a while. I turned to Sarah. Let's go, honey. No. I think we need to talk. Didn't need to talk. She nodded, squeezing my arm quickly, a silent message of support. Walked out of the kitchen, leaving Martha and David standing there, shuttered and speechless in their own home. As we passed into the living room, I heard Martha let out a small guttural sob. The satisfaction was immense, but it was also tinged with a strange sadness. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about respect, and sometimes you had to burn bridges to build new ones. Went to our cramped little room, and I closed the door, leaving them to their stunned silence and crumbling reality. Conversation, the difficult one, was about to begin with Sarah. De kärnkorts så sättlig jag tänker svårsäpig begin with the abscissa. The door to our small room clicked shut, sealing us off from the shockwave we just created. Sarah immediately turned to me, her face still pale, but her eyes held a mix of emotions I couldn't quite decipher. Relief, fear, confusion, and something else. Pride. Vikagas Vika. Relief, fear, confusion, and something else. Pride. She whispered to a voice barely audible, why? You actually did it. You bought the land and She looked around our tiny room, at the worn carpet, the peeling wallpaper, the narrow space we'd occupied for so long. All this time, all those extra hours you worked, that's what it was for, wasn't it? I nodded. Oh, guide. I nodded. Every single penny, every late night, every ignored insult, it was all for this. To finally stand on my own 2 feet, on my own land. She sank onto the edge of the bed, her hands clutching her head. Her hands clutching her head. I can't believe it. My parents, they're going to lose their minds. This is going to destroy them. And pat the names, so going to destroy them. Dus. They too, shockend do. They destroyed me, Sarah, brick by brick, for 5 years, I said, sitting beside her, taking her hand. Her fingers were cold. Every day a new insult, every conversation a fresh cut. They chipped away at my self-worth until I felt like a hollow shell. They Bundy Young wasn't good enough for you, that I was a burden, a drain on their resources, all while I was working my tail off, trying to build something, not just for myself but for us. She murmured, tears welling in her eyes. Pop-rock came then, times longer than you. I know, she murmured, tears welling in her eyes. 215 you, I know they were awful, and I'm so sorry, John. I should have stood up for you more. I should have told them to stop. But they're my parents. I just told. I didn't know what to do. I understand, I said, genuinely. You were caught in the middle. But now they've gone too far, and I've done what I had to do. This isn't just about revenge, Sarah. It's about drawing a line in the sand. It's about respect. It's about us building our future without their constant negativity. She looked at me, her eyes red-rimmed but clearing. So what now? Are you going to kick them out? That was the million-dollar question. I don't know, I admitted. I don't want to be like them. I don't want to be like them or to be cruel. But I also can't go back to the way things were. Can't live under this roof, on my land, with them still treating me like dirt. A loud bang on our door made us both jump. John, Sarah, open this door. We need to talk. We need to talk. It was Martha's voice, shrill and demanding though, laced with desperation. Now I looked at Sarah. She swallowed hard, then nodded. Let's talk to them, but you need to be firm, John. They won't listen otherwise. I opened the door. Martha and David stood there, their faces blotchy and tear-stained. David's eyes were red and Martha's mascara was smudged. They looked defeated, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen them before. It was almost jarring. How could you do this, John? Martha wailed, dissolving into fresh tears. We gave you a home. We took you in, your call.
You didn't give me a home, Martha, I said, my voice even, though my heart ached for Sarah. You gave me a room you charged me for, and you subjected me to years of emotional abuse. You never saw me as family, just a convenient target for your frustrations. You belittled my work, my ambitions, my very character. You made it clear constantly that I was beneath you. David stepped forward, surprisingly calm. We just wanted the best for Sarah. We were trying to protect her. By tearing down her husband? Sarah cut in, her voice surprisingly strong. By making me feel ashamed of the man I chose? Mom, Dad, I love John, I chose him. And you never respected that choice. You never respected him. Martha gasped, truly hurt that her daughter was siding against her. Sarah, how can you say that? We only ever loved you. And I love you, Sarah said, stepping fully out of the room, standing between them and me. But you've been so cruel to John. You called him a lazy bum, a parasite. For years. You said he'd never amount to anything. Well, he just bought the land your house is on. What does that say about amounting to anything? The raw truth of her words hung in the air. Martha and David recoiled, the argument draining from them, replaced by a quiet, simmering shame. We want you to undo this, David said, his voice low, almost a plea. Sell us the land back. We'll pay you. Whatever you paid, we'll give you back, plus a little extra for your trouble. I shook my head. It's not about the money, David. It never was. It was about respect. About proving that I am not, and never was, a lazy bum. It was about taking back my dignity. So, what do you want? Martha asked again, her voice small. I want an apology, I stated simply. A real one. Not a sorry if you misunderstood kind of apology. A we were wrong. We were cruel, and we deeply regret how we treated you apology. And I want it to stop. The insults, The belittling, the constant negativity. If you want to continue living here on this land, then things have to change. Immediately and permanently. They stared at me, their faces blank with shock. An apology. After all these years, it was a foreign concept to them. They were the parents, the ones who were always right. The ones who dispensed judgment, not received it. Otherwise. David asked, his voice barely a whisper.
Otherwise, I said,
looking him straight in the eye, we start talking about a lease agreement or a move-out date. Your choice. The air crackled with tension. It was the hardest thing I'd ever said. Sarah stood beside me silent, her presence a solid wall of support. The ball was in their court now. And for the first time, it felt like I actually had a future. The silence that followed my ultimatum was different this time. Not the explosive shock from earlier, but a tense, heavy quiet, thick with a desperate calculation. Martha and David stared at me, then at each other, their minds clearly racing. They were trying to figure out if I was bluffing, if this was some elaborate scheme, or if I truly meant what I said.
Martha was the first to break it,
though her voice was still tight with a mixture of anger and disbelief. A lease agreement? A move-out date? You can't be serious. This is our home. Where would we go? You'd make your own wife's parents homeless. That's a choice you would be making, Martha, Sarah interjected, surprising all of us, including me. Her voice, though still soft, had a newfound steel to it. John isn't making us homeless. He's asking for basic human respect, something you haven't given him for 5 years. Martha's head snapped towards Sarah. Sarah, darling, don't be silly. Your father and I always had your best interests at heart. We just wanted you to be happy. And you thought making my husband miserable was the way to do that? Sarah countered, stepping closer to her mother. Her eyes, usually so quick to well with tears, were dry and steady. Do you remember when you told him he was a burden on our family finances? Right after he landed that huge web design contract that helped us pay off our student loans early. Do you remember calling his work pretend work at Christmas dinner in front of the whole family, when he was working 70 hours a week? Martha flinched. David looked away. These were painful memories, not just for me, but clearly for Sarah too. She was finally airing out all the dirty laundry, all the hidden cruelties. And what about when you told him he wasn't allowed to use the good towels in the guest bathroom because he wasn't proper company? Sarah continued, her voice rising slightly. Or when you commented on his eating habits at every meal, saying he ate too much for someone who didn't do anything all day. I stood there, watching, letting Sarah lead the charge. This was her moment, her turning point. For so long she had endured their treatment of me, suppressing her own feelings of injustice. But now, seeing me stand up for myself, seeing the tangible result of my silent struggle, something had snapped inside her. We didn't mean it that way, David mumbled, picking at a loose thread on his sweater. We were just expressing our concerns. Your concerns made him feel worthless, Sarah stated flatly. And I let you do it. I stood by and watched. And I regret that more than anything. John has always been a good man, a hard-working man. He loved me, respected me, supported me even when you tore him down. He worked in silence, saved every penny, just so he could finally be independent. So he could show you that he was capable, that he was worthy of respect. And he did it. He bought this land, the land you are standing on, the land under your house, with his own money, money you called play money, and nothing. Sarah took a deep breath, her chest heaving. He bought it because he was tired of being a guest in his own marriage. He bought it because he wanted us to have a real home, a place where he wasn't constantly being judged and belittled. So yes, Mom, Dad, if you can't offer a genuine apology and change your behavior, then you will have to find somewhere else to live. Because I am done with it. John and I are a team, and you will respect him, or you will not be a part of our lives. The weight of Sarah's words hung heavy in the air. This wasn't just me issuing an ultimatum. This was their own daughter, their perfect Sarah, drawing a line in the sand, one they never expected. Martha's eyes widened, tears streaking clean paths through her smudged makeup. David's shoulders slumped. They had lost their strongest ally, their buffer, the one person they thought would always side with them. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Finally, Martha broke the silence, her voice reedy and thin. Sarah, you would really leave us? I won't leave you, Mom, Sarah said, her voice softening slightly but remaining firm. But John and I need to build a life where we are respected. If that means you have to leave, then yes, that's what will happen. We're not asking for much. Just respect. Just an end to the insults. Just an apology. David cleared his throat, his gaze fixed on the floor. We were hard on him. Too hard, perhaps. We were worried about you, Sarah. We didn't understand his kind of work. He looked up, meeting my eyes for the first time with something other than contempt. We're sorry, John. For all the things we said. For calling you names. For making you feel unwelcome. It wasn't the perfect, heartfelt apology I had dreamed of, but it was a start. It was an admission, a crack in their impenetrable wall of arrogance. Martha was still sobbing quietly, her face buried in her hands. And you, Martha? I asked, looking at her. Do you have anything to say? She slowly lifted her head, her eyes red, her face swollen. She looked utterly defeated. I am sorry, John, she choked out. I was wrong. I was worried for Sarah, and I took it out on you. I called you terrible things. I didn't see how hard you worked. I treated you unfairly. Please. Please don't kick us out. This is our home. The raw desperation in her voice was startling. It was the closest thing to genuine humility I had ever heard from her. This was not just about the land anymore. It was about years of accumulated pain, finally being acknowledged. The air seemed to lighten a fraction. The first step towards a different future, however uncertain, had just been taken. The apology, while not perfect, was enough of a concession for me to pause the immediate eviction threat. We had broken the wall of their pride, and that was a victory in itself. But trust, like a shattered vase, wouldn't simply mend itself. An apology is a start, I said, my voice still firm. Actions speak louder than words. From now on, things have to change. No more insults, no more belittling, no more comments about my work or my contribution. You treat me with respect, the same respect you'd expect from anyone, and you treat Sarah's choices with respect. Martha nodded, still looking thoroughly miserable. David just grunted, which for him was probably an enthusiastic agreement. Sarah looked at me, a silent question in her eyes. I knew what she was asking. Was this truly enough? Could they change? Could we live here in peace? We'll need to establish some boundaries, I continued. We need our own space, our own privacy. No more banging on the door at 7 a.m. No more unsolicited advice about our finances or our future. And we will need a formal lease agreement drawn up. For a symbolic rent, something small, just to establish the new dynamic. Not because I need the money, but because it clearly defines the relationship. You are occupying my land." This brought a fresh wave of shock to their faces. A lease agreement. That was a tangible legal document that cemented my ownership and their new status as tenants. It wasn't about money. It was about power and boundaries. "A lease," Martha stammered. But we're family." "Family respects boundaries, Martha," Sarah said, stepping forward again. "Family doesn't constantly insult and demean each other. This is for the best. It's clear what's expected of everyone." They argued for a bit, trying to negotiate, trying to find loopholes, but I held firm. Sarah held firm. They were used to being in charge, to dictating terms. Now they were on the receiving end. After about an hour of back and forth, fueled by their increasing desperation, they reluctantly agreed to consider it. They needed time to process this new reality. The next few days were incredibly awkward. The house was quieter than it had ever been. Martha and David walked on eggshells, their usual boisterous arguments replaced by hushed whispers. They still hadn't fully accepted the new dynamic, but they were clearly terrified of losing their home. The insults stopped, at least directly to my face, but I could feel their resentment simmering, bubbling just beneath the surface. I knew this wasn't a magic fix. This was just the first painful step. Then came the calls. My phone started ringing off the hook. Sarah's phone too. First her Aunt Carol, then Uncle Bob, then her cousin Gary, the one who was a doctor and always held up as the gold standard. They were calling, asking what was going on. "John, Sarah, what's this I hear about you buying Martha and David's land?" Aunt Carol asked, her voice dripping with fake concern. "They're saying you are trying to kick them out, that you are taking advantage of them." "Taking advantage?" I scoffed. "Aunt Carol, for 5 years they've been calling me a lazy bum and a good-for-nothing. Now I own the land their house is on. Tell me, who's taking advantage of whom?" Sarah handled her end of the cause with surprising strength. "Aunt Carol, Mom and Dad treated John terribly for years. They brought this on themselves. He's asking for basic respect. If they can't give it, then yes, there will be consequences." "They didn't tell you the whole story, did they?" The family drama was beginning to spread like wildfire. Martha and David, stripped of their power, had clearly run to their siblings and cousins, painting me as the villain, the greedy son-in-law trying to steal their home. They were playing the victim, hoping to rally the family against me. But Sarah, to her immense credit, wasn't letting them. She was telling the truth, raw and unvarnished, about the years of abuse. The general consensus from the family was mixed. Some were shocked by my actions, seeing me as heartless. Others, who had perhaps seen glimpses of Martha and David's true colors over the years, were more understanding, even secretly impressed by my audacity. One evening, Martha cornered Sarah in the kitchen. I heard their voices from my office. "Sarah, you can't let him do this. This lease, it's humiliating. What will the family say? They'll think we're beggars." "They already think you are unkind, Mom," Sarah said, her voice surprisingly firm. "They know how you've treated John. Do you think no one else noticed? Do you think they didn't see how you talked about him at family gatherings? How you put him down? People aren't stupid, Mom." They might have pretended not to notice, but they saw. There was a long silence, then Martha's voice weaker. "But this is our home, our legacy. And a legacy of disrespect isn't one worth keeping," Sarah replied. "You have a choice, Mom. You can either learn to respect John, truly respect him, and live peacefully here, or you can refuse and find another place. He's trying to give you a path forward, not just kick you out. But it's on your terms now, not yours." The conversation ended there. Martha didn't argue further. The external pressure from the family had backfired on her. Instead of rallying support, it had forced her to confront the reality that her own daughter, and even some extended family, saw her actions for what they were. The ground beneath their feet wasn't just legally mine. The moral high ground had shifted too. The days turned into a week, then two. Tension in the house was a palpable thing, thick enough to cut with a knife. Martha and David had mostly retreated to their own parts of the house. Conversations were minimal, clipped, and always polite to an almost unsettling degree. The insults had stopped, but so had any semblance of warmth or family interaction. It was like living in a mausoleum, but with the occasional sound of heavy sighs and muttered complaints. I had drawn up a simple lease agreement. It stated a symbolic rent of $1 per month purely to establish the legal tenancy. It also outlined clauses about respecting boundaries, maintaining peace, and not interfering with our lives. It was more a psychological contract than a financial one. I presented it to them one evening after dinner. Martha read it, her lips pressed into a thin line. David snatched it from her, scanned it quickly, and then slammed it down on the table. "This is outrageous," he declared, his voice rising, but without its usual authoritative boom. It was more like a nervous bark. "You are treating us like strangers, like we're going to cause trouble." "You have caused trouble, David," I said calmly, "for 5 years. This agreement is to ensure that it doesn't continue. It protects everyone." "But $1 a month?" Martha whined. "That's insulting. Are you trying to make us feel like charity cases?" "You made me feel like a charity case for 5 years," I countered, looking her directly in the eye. "You made me feel like I was indebted to you for every breath I took in this house. This symbolic rent is a reflection of the reality. You are living on my property. It's not about the money, Martha, you know that. It's about the principle. And the principle is that respect goes both ways." Sarah stepped in. "Mom, Dad, this isn't negotiable. John and I need to feel secure in our own home, in our own lives. This lease is how we do that. Either you sign it, or we move on to the next step." The next step hung in the air, unsaid but perfectly clear. Eviction. David ran a hand over his bald head. He looked tired, defeated. Martha began to tear up again. "You want to throw us out?" She whimpered. "After all we've done for you?" "You never did anything for me, Martha," I said, my voice unwavering. "You tolerated me, and you took every opportunity to remind me how little you thought of me. Everything I have, everything I've built, I did on my own in spite of you. Not because of you." I laid the pen on the table next to the document. "Choice is yours. Sign the lease, accept the new terms, and we can try to find a way forward, or refuse. And we start the legal process of finding you a new place to live. It's really that simple." They looked at each other, their faces a mixture of desperation and pride. Pride was fighting a losing battle against the very real fear of losing their home, their entire life. This house was their anchor, their identity. They had lived here for decades. Thought of starting over, especially at their age, was clearly terrifying. Finally, David let out a long, shaky breath. He picked up the pen. "Martha," he said, his voice raspy, "we have no choice." Martha choked back a sob but didn't argue. David signed first, his hand trembling slightly. Then he pushed the paper and pen towards Martha. She hesitated for a long moment, her eyes darting between my unwavering gaze and the document. She picked up the pen, her hand shaking even more than David's, and scrawled her signature. It was done. The lease was signed. I took the document, folded it carefully, and put it in my pocket. "Good," Copies will be made for everyone tomorrow. For now, consider this a new beginning." The silence returned, but this time it felt different. It wasn't just tension. It was a mix of resignation and a strange, fragile hope. They had been forced to humble themselves, forced to acknowledge their new reality. It wasn't a celebration, but it was a profound shift. The next day, as if on cue, Martha and David started acting differently. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a grudging acceptance. Martha even offered me a cup of coffee, something she hadn't done in years. It wasn't a warm offer, more like a tentative peace offering, but it was a start. David, for his part, actually asked me a question about my work, about the internet, something he usually scoffed at. I answered him politely, cautiously. The air in the house, while still heavy, was no longer suffocating. It felt like the beginning of a very long, very slow thaw. We had established the boundaries. Now, it was about whether they could truly live within them. Power was unequivocally mine, but how I used it would define the future of our family. I didn't want to rule with an iron fist. I wanted peace, and maybe eventually a semblance of a healthy family. But it would be a long road filled with many more tests. The signing of the lease was a turning point, but not an instant fix. It was more like the end of a very long, very painful chapter, and the hesitant beginning of an uncertain new one. The atmosphere in the house slowly shifted from outright hostility to an awkward, almost forced politeness. Martha and David were clearly walking on eggshells. The direct insults stopped completely. They even started saying please and thank you, which was such a foreign concept coming from them that it felt like a glitch in the matrix. I still caught them occasionally exchanging glances or heard hushed whispers when I walked by their living room. I knew the resentment was still there, simmering. They couldn't just switch off years of ingrained arrogance and condescension. But the fear of losing their home, the fear of public humiliation among their peers, was a powerful motivator. One evening, about a week after the lease was signed, I was working in my office, my glorified closet, when Sarah came in and closed the door softly behind her. She looked contemplative. "They're talking about it," she said quietly. "About what?" I asked, looking up from my laptop. "About how much they hate the lease," she clarified. "And about how you cornered them. But also about how they shouldn't have been so mean. Mom was actually crying earlier, saying she's scared. Not just of you kicking them out, but scared of losing me. Of losing us." My heart, which had been hardening over the years, softened a fraction. "Scared of losing us?" I repeated. "That's a first." "Yeah," Sarah said, sitting on the small stool next to my desk. "She realizes now that her actions had consequences. Not just for you, but for our relationship. She said she misses how things used to be before all the fighting." "Things were never good, Sarah." I reminded her gently. "They were just quietly awful for me. She just didn't see it, because she was the one dishing it out." "I know," she sighed. "Still, they're actually talking about what they did, acknowledging it, not just to you, because they had to, but to each other. It's progress, maybe," I conceded. "It's a long way from a genuine change of heart. They're doing this out of fear, not out of true remorse." "Fear can lead to remorse, though," Sarah said, looking at me earnestly. "If they start acting kindly out of fear, maybe over time it becomes habit. Maybe they realize that treating people with respect feels better than treating them like dirt. And maybe, just maybe, they can earn back some of the trust they destroyed." She had a point. I didn't want to be a tyrant. I just wanted peace. And a functional family, if that was even possible. The next day, David approached me while I was getting coffee. He cleared his throat, avoiding my gaze. "John," he started, his voice unusually subdued. About everything. We, Martha and we've been talking." I waited, keeping my expression neutral. He took a deep breath. "We've really messed up. We treated you terribly. T here is no excuse for it. We were arrogant, we were mean, we were wrong. And we're truly sorry for that." He actually looked me in the eye. His eyes were sincere, no hint of the old disdain. "We want to try and make things right, not just because of the lease or the land, but because we don't want to lose Sarah. And we don't want to lose you. If we can fix things." I was stunned. This was a step beyond anything I'd expected. This was a genuine apology, delivered without coercion. Martha then came into the kitchen, looking nervous but also determined. "He's right, John," she said, her voice soft and shaky. "We've been awful. It's shameful how we behaved. You didn't deserve any of it. We let our own worries and prejudices turn us into bullies. We regret it, truly. We want a chance to show you we can be better. We want to be a real family again." Her eyes were red, and she seemed on the verge of tears, but there was no manipulation this time. Just raw honesty, it felt. Real. "This is big," I said, my voice quiet. "This is what I've been waiting for. For you to actually acknowledge what you did and truly regret it." "We do," David insisted. "We do, John. More than you know. Living like this with the tension, with Sarah so upset, it's unbearable. We've caused this, and we want to fix it." So Martha added, "What can we do? How can we make it up to you? How can we show you we're serious?" I looked at their faces, at their genuine remorse. This wasn't just about them wanting to keep their house anymore. This was about them wanting to mend the broken relationships. It was a long shot, but maybe, just maybe, there was a path to healing. "Well," I said slowly, "first, you keep to the terms of the lease, not just legally, but spiritually. That means respect, peace, and no more undermining. Second, it's going to take time to rebuild trust. That comes with consistent good behavior, but as for something tangible, I need to see effort. Real effort." They both nodded eagerly. "Anything," Martha whispered. "Just tell us." "Okay," I said, taking a deep breath. This was it. The real negotiation, not just about control, but about rebuilding. Tea here is something that would mean a lot. It's not about money, but about showing you genuinely value my work and my place in this family. It's about a permanent change to this house, to our lives here. I looked around the small, cramped kitchen, then towards the living room, and finally towards the little closet I called my office. I want to convert the unused space in the basement into a proper soundproof office for my business. And I want free rein on the design and build. That's my proof of concept. That's my peace offering. If you truly want to make amends, you'll help me build that space." They looked at each other, then back at me. A real office. In their house. A place for the lazy bum to do his pretend work. It was a huge ask, a symbolic gesture of acceptance. Martha and David stared at me, the request for a basement office hanging in the air. I could see the wheels turning in their minds. It wasn't just about building a room. It was about accepting my profession, my presence, and my authority in their home. It was a massive symbolic gesture. "A soundproof office?" David finally asked, his voice low. "In the basement? That's a big project, John." "I know," I replied. "And it's a big ask, but it's also a big step towards showing me you are serious about rebuilding trust and respect." It shows me you truly accept my work, not just tolerate it. And it gives Sarah and me a dedicated space, a real sense of home within these walls, rather than just a cramped bedroom. Martha looked uncertain.
But the basement, it's just storage, and it's damp down there.
We'll waterproof it, I said, already having thought this through. We'll put in proper flooring, good lighting, and proper ventilation. It won't be a dungeon, Martha. It will be a professional space, one that adds value to the house, even if you don't realize it yet. Continued, and it's not just about me. Sarah needs a proper home too, one where her husband isn't treated like a second-class citizen. This office is about providing stability, about making our lives here viable for the long term. If you want us to stay, if you want Sarah to be happy, then this is what it takes. Sarah stepped forward, putting a hand on my arm. Mom, Dad, please consider it. This would mean so much to John. It's not just about a room, it's about acknowledging his hard work, his career, his contribution. It's about accepting him fully into the family, not just as a guest. Would they cling to their pride and refuse, risking everything? Or would they humble themselves further for the sake of their daughter and the peace of their home? Finally, David let out a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of years of resentment. "All right, John," he said, his voice quiet. "If it means that much to you, and to Sarah, we'll do it. We'll help you build your office." Martha nodded slowly, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "Yes," she whispered, "we'll help. We want to make things right." It wasn't a sudden embrace or a declaration of undying love, but it was a profound acceptance. It was an acknowledgement of my terms, not just legally but personally. It was their way of showing they were willing to invest in our future and in my place within it. The next few weeks were a flurry of activity. I researched materials, drew up plans, and started clearing out the basement. To my surprise, Martha and David actually pitched in. David, who usually avoided any manual labor, helped me move old boxes and furniture. Martha, who had always viewed my work as trivial, asked questions about the office design, even offered suggestions for shelves. They weren't experts, but their presence, their willingness to get their hands dirty, was more meaningful than any words. It was an act of service, an act of reconciliation. There were still awkward moments, still silences, but they were interspersed with actual conversation. We talked about power tools, insulation, and paint colors. We talked about things that had nothing to do with past grievances. One afternoon, as we were framing out a wall, David paused, wiping sweat from his brow. "You know, John," he said, looking at the emerging structure, "this is going to be a good space. You will be able to get a lot of work done down here. Quiet." I nodded, a small smile playing on my lips. "That's the idea." Martha, who was wiping down some old shelves, added, "And it will be good for the house too. Extra usable space. Adds value, doesn't it?" I suppressed a chuckle. "It does, Martha. A lot of value." It wasn't just physical value they were realizing. They were starting to see the value in my work, in my presence, in the respect I command. They were starting to see me not as a lazy bum, but as a capable, hard-working man who was building something, not just for himself, but for their family. We hit snags, of course. Plumbing issues, electrical quirks unique to old houses. But instead of blaming me or complaining, they would actually work with me to find solutions. It was a new dynamic, one of collaboration rather than confrontation. Sarah would often join us, bringing down snacks or helping with lighter tasks, her face glowing with a quiet happiness I hadn't seen and needed. This project, this shared effort to build my office, became the crucible for our new relationship. It wasn't about erasing the past, but about building something new on top of it. a foundation of grudging respect that slowly, painstakingly, began to transform into something more akin to understanding. It was a long road ahead, but for the first time it felt like we were walking it together, instead of constantly at odds. The office took shape over the next few months. It wasn't just a room, it was a testament to a shift in power, in dynamics, and in relationships. David learned how to use a stud finder, and Martha, surprisingly, became quite adept at painting smooth, even walls. Sarah and I would often catch them down there, even when we weren't working, just looking at the progress, almost as if they were proud of it. When it was finally finished, it was exactly what I had envisioned. Quiet professional space with good lighting, a comfortable desk, and shelves full of books and equipment. It was my sanctuary, my command center, and a symbol of my hard-won independence. The day I moved my computer and all my gear into the new office, Martha actually brought down a plate of homemade cookies. "For your new office, John," she said, a small, genuine smile on her face, "to celebrate." David came down later, carrying a framed picture of Sarah and me from our wedding day. "Thought this might look nice on your desk," he mumbled, a slight blush on his cheeks. "Make it feel more like home." I looked at them, truly looked at them, and saw not the monsters who had tormented me for years, but two aging people who had made mistakes and were now trying, genuinely trying, to atone for them. It wasn't perfect, and the scars of the past would always be there, but something fundamental had changed. Living in the house after the office was complete was different. The tension had largely dissipated. Martha and David still had their moments, their occasional grumbles, but they were no longer directed at me. They were just regular old couple complaints. We ate meals together, and they even asked me about my clients, showing a genuine, if still slightly bewildered, interest in my work. They stopped calling me a lazy bum. They stopped the belittling. They started asking for my opinion on household matters, consulting me, treating me like an equal. It felt strange, freeing. Sarah blossomed too. She no longer hunched her shoulders or looked at the floor. She laughed more, spoke up more, and seemed genuinely happy. Our relationship, which had been strained by the constant parental interference, grew stronger than ever. We had faced the biggest challenge of our married lives, and we had come through it together. One evening, about 6 months after I bought the land, I was sitting in my new office, working on a complex project. It was late and the house was quiet. I heard a soft knock on the door. It was Martha. "John," she said, standing in the doorway looking a little nervous. "Are you busy? Can I talk to you for a moment?" "Come in, Martha," I said, leaning back in my chair. She stepped inside, looking around the office, then met my gaze. She took a deep breath and her eyes welled up. "I just wanted to say thank you for everything, for not kicking us out, for giving us another chance, for being patient." She paused, her voice trembling, "and for being right about everything, about how we treated you, about how hard you work. You are not a lazy bum, John. You are a good man, a very good man. And I am proud to have you as my son-in-law." It was a full, unprompted, heartfelt apology, something I had dreamed of for years. The words hit me hard, washing away a significant portion of the lingering bitterness. It wasn't just the words, it was the look in her eyes, the sincerity in her voice. This wasn't out of fear. This was genuine remorse, genuine acceptance. I stood up, walked over to her, and for the first time, truly embraced my mother-in-law. She hugged me back tightly, and I could feel her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "It's okay, Martha," I whispered. "It's okay, we all make mistakes. What matters is what we do next." From that day forward, the last vestiges of animosity melted away. We truly started functioning as a family. Martha and David were still Martha and David, with their quirks and their occasional stubbornness, but the core of their cruelty was gone. They respected me. They respected our marriage. And I, in turn, found a new kind of respect for them, for their willingness to change, however reluctantly at first. The land, the lease, the office, they weren't just about revenge. They were about forcing a conversation, creating an undeniable truth, and ultimately about healing. I bought the land, not just to prove them wrong, but to buy back my peace, to buy back my dignity, and to build a true home for Sarah and me. And in the process, perhaps, we all ended up building something stronger than just a house. We built a family, finally, on solid ground.